Three things you need to remember about Charlottesville. 1, it's not what you think it is. 2, authority is the goal. And 3, your constitutional rights do not exist. Welcome to the Michael Newman Podcast, everybody. You know the drill. Go to michaelnewmanproductions.com. You can contact me that way. Send me a tweet, Newmaniac1. Support the show. Very, very important. We'll get to all that in detail coming up later on in the show. But there are 3 very important things you need to recognize here. All the rhetoric, all the things that you've been hearing from all different sides regarding the Charlottesville. Is it Charlottesville? There's a Charlotte, and then a Charlottesville. Anyway, been going on for a while, and people have been talking about are completely off base, right? It's all there to sort of pull you away from the important things that we need to be talking about here, and what the real role and what the real evil was in this instance. This is Donald Trump, what he said after.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. It's been going on for a long time in our country. Not Donald Trump, not Barack Obama. This has been going on for a long, long time. It has no place in America. What is vital now is a swift restoration of law and order and the protection of innocent lives. Above all else, we must remember this truth. No matter our color, creed, religion, or political party, we are all Americans first. We love our country. We love our God. We love our flag. We're proud of our country. We're proud of who we are.
And all nice, flowery words. I don't particularly like it when he's reading off a teleprompter because it doesn't seem like it's all that genuine. But it's important what he said in the beginning there. This egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence has no place in America. That is a wonderful and nice sentiment. But it's the words of a child. To say that it has no place is factually inaccurate. There is a place. And that place has existed within societies of man since the very beginning of time. It exists. It is the bane of human existence. It will not go away. Not on its own. People wish to gain authority over others, will use whatever means necessary to do so, which brings hatred, bigotry, and yes, of course, violence. That's why we have governments, or supposedly. That's what the government is supposed to be there for. That's what our Constitution is supposed to be there for. The only true role of government is to keep others from killing us from outside and to keep us from killing ourselves. Anything beyond that is really beyond the purview of government. To adjudicate differences between people. And unfortunately, in this case of Charlottesville, what we've seen is government strategically decide not to intervene for a bigger purpose. The 3 things that we've heard a lot about, well, there's a lot of things we've heard a lot about in this case. You've heard about the groups that are involved. So understand what you think is going on is not what's going on. The alt-right, number 1. The alt-right, you've heard that term quite an awful lot. The alt-right are not on the right. They are leftists. They are leftists because their philosophy is based solely around identity. So, and anything that based on something so skin deep is a leftist policy. It is a Nazi policy. It is a leftist policy. And the Nazis are on the left. National Socialist Party? Mm-hmm. Antifa is a redefined Nazi. You see, it's not that a Nazism is, or the bad parts of Nazism are specifically associated with white people. No. What makes Nazism bad is the group think or the group politics that it puts into play, that certain groups are just genuinely, genetically better than others. That question of better than others based on race, right? And on the other side of that, see, the Antifa people, the leftists in this country, the Black Lives Matter, they've turned that that theory sort of upside down, but it serves the same purpose. They're saying that because of someone's race, this is what Antifa, this is what Black Lives Matter, this is what your college campuses, this is what white privilege is teaching people, that not that one group is better than everybody else, but one group is worse than everybody else. So it's the inverse of Nazism, but it's actually the same belief. Antifa are redefined Nazis. They are typical fascists. They are leftists. And both groups, the alt-right and Antifa, are linked through identity politics. Identity politics. Identity, using your skin color, whatever it might be, doesn't really matter, as a way of creating a group and then controlling that group. And here's what you haven't heard from anybody at all, from what I've seen over the past several days or so. Neither one of those groups, Antifa, the alt-right, or anyone involved, are relevant to this conversation. Nope. Absolutely irrelevant to this conversation, because I wasn't there, right? I wasn't there. Most of you were not there. Very few people were there, but I guarantee you what happened there will affect me and you and all of us in a very grand way. The groups involved are not relevant. My friends, there will always be groups that hate each other, regardless of how you define them. It doesn't matter if they're alt-right. It doesn't matter if they're Antifa. It doesn't matter if they're leftist. It doesn't matter if they're communist. It doesn't matter. There are always going to be groups that hate each other and will act out violently, regardless of what their name is and regardless of what their reasoning is for. That's why we created very broad terms for protecting each individual using the government. We guarantee certain rights, and if we guarantee those rights to the individual, that then will protect the group. But unfortunately, the government refused to protect individual liberties, and that's why we got what we've got. Authority is the goal of all of this. And from every party involved, authority is the goal. Okay? Not power. Power and authority are two totally different things. Everyone, every person, every individual has power. You have power. I have power. What is power? Power is defined as a willingness to disregard another's humanity. That is power. So, you as an individual, if you decide you have absolutely no love for humanity outside yourself and disregard everyone else as being a living, sentient human being, then you have a tremendous amount of power, because you can kill them, you can get rid of them, you can do whatever you want and not have a problem with it, right? Because you have power over that person because you are willing to disregard their humanity. Authority is to acquire control of the power of the individual through a willful grant. Okay? That's authority. Being able to say, you go kill, or you give me your stuff. That's authority, without having to impart any violent affect. As a matter of fact, the violent affect could simply be a threat because you've got a lot of people on your side that can use their individual power to go out after others violently. You have a lot of authority when you have brown shirts, right? You have a lot of authority when you're a leftist Democrat, when you have Antifa out there. Tremendous amount of authority because you can send them out so they will use their individual power to steal the humanity of others. Speech is the only nonviolent path to gaining authority. That's why it's enshrined in the Constitution. You see, it's a check and balance against government itself. Okay, the authority of government itself. Because one, an individual can go out and make an argument, can go out and give a persuasive speech, can go out and meet with people and gather. And through simple power of rhetoric, logic, evidence, convince people to hand their power over to this person or this entity or this group, thereby gaining authority through nonviolent means. And by the way, when people willfully give power over in that manner, they believe in it. And it's very hard to get them to pull away. So that power, that authority that you've been granted through the power of your rhetoric is much more strong than the power through the barrel of a gun. Speech is the only nonviolent path towards gaining authority. And authority gained by groups and individuals through speech threatens government's authority. That's why they don't like freedom of speech. And you've seen this all over the world. The United States is the only place to have, or supposedly to have, true freedom of speech. Everyone else in the world has some sort of hate speech legislation, which is sort of a stopgap measure, so they can just call your speech hate when your speech starts to encroach on the authority and power of the government. That's the purpose of hate speech or hate speech legislation. And your constitutional rights do not exist. Okay? Let's just understand this. Okay, they took away your Fourth Amendment rights using terrorists. Okay? That they're gone. That doesn't exist anymore. You're constantly being spied on, and if they want to come get you, they will. Government, in this case, we're talking about Charlottesville here. Government, in this case, willfully allowed this incident to happen by refusing to protect the constitutionally guaranteed rights of speech and assembly in an attempt to stoke enough fear and hatred in society that curbing freedom of speech would be possible. This attack on speech, this attack on individual sovereignty, individual liberty, and humanity has been going on in earnest for a couple of years now. Every time you hear somebody complain about social media, social media is destroying the world. Social media is the cause of all these problems. Understand that is coming from a governmental place where they do not like people communicating with each other. They don't like it because it's an authority. It's a power they don't control. That's what this is about. You got a group that went out, got a permit, had to fight for that permit in court to go out and have their event. When they had their event, there were plenty of cops there. The National Guard was called out. They had 2 first responders for every one person in the alt-right rally, whatever it was. There was like 500 people that showed up. So they had 2 cops for every one, right? Then when Antifa got there, all the cops left and refused to protect. That's what happened. And that's what happens at the end. You get death. Understand, your constitutional rights do not exist if it is in the interest of the government and their ability to acquire more authority over you. The Constitution will not be enforced. It will not be enforced. There's no such thing as hate speech, but there is threatening rhetoric.
Run, Nazis, run!
One more time.
Run, Nazis, run!
That is a threat. Just the way it's said, the way it's screamed, is a threat. If you do not run, I will kill you. But that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. Now, Charlottesville, lots of violence in the streets. It was all over the news, for the past couple of days or so, been all weekend long. Stefan Molyneux had a representative from, I believe, Rebel TV out of Canada. Pretty good source, in fact. I like them. Her name is Faith Goldie, and she gives the backstory on what actually happened.
So originally what had happened was a bunch of leaders within the so-called alt-right were scheduled to basically stage a demonstration within Lee Park here. There's been a lot of local controversy about a statue of General Lee that some vice mayor wanted to take down. And it was kind of, as white male consciousness is on the rise right now, it was a symbolic gesture for them to meet there. They had a permit to be there. Then that was removed. Then they got a federal court order that, yes, indeed, they could march there. They could hang out. Of course, they knew that at least thousands of Antifa were slated to show up based on their numbers. So police were present right out of the gates. It was supposed to take place at noon. By noon, of course, riot police had already come onto the scene. Richard Spencer had already been maced, I think, several times. He was put promptly into a cab and shuttled off. And basically what happened by about an hour after when the tentative, the scheduled event was to take place, what happened was that you had police in full riot gear divvying up almost like everyone into mini protests. And what was good about that was that by and large, the groups were sort of segregated. So you had, the Patriots / alt-righters / white nationalists, like whole hodgepodge on the right, being quarantined from the Antifa BLM folks. That went on for about probably 2 hours. Riot police were making moves, and there was a lot of, I'd say, high hostilities when the groups did meet. I saw some BLM folks and just young black men throwing rocks at former veterans. That's when I put on my helmet very quickly. And so it was kind of little flare-ups. And then all of a sudden what happened about 2 hours out was all these Antifa BLM folks, I guess, now that all the alt-right had essentially vamooshed, they decided that they were going to take to the streets. And what was so interesting, Stefan, is that all of a sudden, all of the police who were in riot gear, there were, militarized armored vehicles out there. Apparently the National Guard was called out. So all of these cops that were very present and were in all my periscopes, all my pictures, and making moves towards even peaceful demonstrators, all of them were not to be seen. Not a single person in uniform.
So all the cops took off, leaving the people that were there with a permit, by the way, at their mercy. All the cops took off. You see, the city didn't want these nasty people there. They didn't like their speech. And they were forced through a federal court order to give them a permit so they could speak, because it's the right thing to do. It is their constitutionally guaranteed freedom of speech. So when they got there, they said, fine, we'll give you your permit, but we're going to let people attack you. We're not going to protect you. So what do? At one point in time, it was basically the group of the alt-righters sort of in the center completely the alt-righters in the center completely surrounded by Antifa folks. That was what ended up happening. And, of course, there's violence on a smaller scale. Now, I guarantee you there's people that are scared out there. There's no cops around. There's no one protecting anybody. There's no law being enforced whatsoever. And somebody takes it upon themselves. Somebody takes it upon themselves and drives a car into a group of people. Now, the question is, did this guy come to this event with it in his mind that he's going to get in this Dodge Charger and run into a group of protesters or run into a group of alt-righters? Was that in his head when he showed up that morning? That's the question that would have to be answered. That's the question that has to be answered if it is to be murder, right? Because if you're in, let's say you're in Mozambique, or something maybe a little bit, well, not closer to home, but you might understand a little bit more. Let's say it was Libya, right after Gaddafi was killed, and you've got no government left, really. Even the military the pro-Gaddafi military, they were in hiding, right? And you're just a dude who no longer has any protection, and there's a group of ISIS coming after you, and you ram them with a car. Are you a murderer? Or are you just scared for your life? Or you're just trying to defend somebody else? I don't know what's in this guy's head. All I do know is that it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to the crime that actually took place. The crime of not enforcing the law to begin with. The crime of allowing, in any way, shape, or form, anyone from Antifa to attack the group that was permitted to speak there. That's the crime. Everything that happened after that point was a natural progression of things that happened, a natural progression that everyone understands, right? Everyone has always understood that. That's why we have government. That's why government was created. That's their job. And they decided not to do it. And the violence continued. One of the organizers, one of these alt-right guys, Jason Kessler, was attacked. Really no protection for this guy.
And people resorting to violence. Yesterday, for murder now! For murder! Invited! I'll be in Washington.
So the guy's takes off and he's running here. There's a couple of cops around, but why was he surrounded in the first place? Why was he surrounded in the first place? Why wasn't there a barrier? This is one of the event organizers. He's trying to calm things down. He's trying to explain what's going on here. And this mad group of individuals decides they're going to physically attack him. And the guy has to run off, right? He looks, there's a couple of cops that are staggering around like drunken idiots, doing absolutely nothing. And this guy's basically on his own, in the middle of a posse coming after him. And nothing's being done. How many people in that crowd were arrested? How many? You know, if you were to act properly, it would have been all of them. That was a threat. When a guy is standing there speaking and you start pushing up around him, that is a threat. That is the definition of a threat. At that point in time, the guy took off running. Why would he do that? Because he was in fear for his life. So, now I want you to understand here, I'm not a quote-unquote alt-righter. I am a writer. I'm on the right. The alt-right is on the left. I am a strict individualist. That's what I am, which does not comport to anything on the quote-unquote alt-right, anti-for left or leftists or progressives. I actually believe solemnly in the humanity of the individual. And so I'm not defending these guys. That's why I started this off by saying the people involved are irrelevant. The people who are involved are irrelevant. Think about it this way, if it were another group, okay? What if it wasn't an alt-righter group and an Antifa group? How might this have turned out, right? Would any other group that was granted the permit to speak there, would they have had some modicum of protection? Would the cops have just taken off at some point in time to let the angry protesters go after them? Would that have happened? No. This was done specifically and for a purpose. There were stand-down orders. This is known. And because of that, everything else, because government decided to not enforce and guarantee constitutional protections to individuals, this is what happened. That is what happens when government walks away from their responsibilities. They, and they alone, are responsible for everything past that point. Now, this continues because there are groups that want to speak and talk and do around the nation. There was a group in, I believe it was in Seattle. Is it Seattle? Yeah. Now, not a white nationalist group either. This is just a Trump group. It has nothing to do with the alt-right or anything else. And they're in Seattle, and, well, this is what happened.
This has been the scene now for about 20 minutes straight. What happened here, counter-protesters have been marching for at least the last 10 or 20 minutes. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get at a group of white nationalists. They call themselves Patriot Prayer. That group now is about 2 blocks away in a square. Police have built a police line pretty much on every point along this march from downtown Seattle. So what they've been trying to do is trying to prevent those 2 groups from meeting, which has led to a lot of frustration with the counter-protesters trying to get at Patriot Prayer. That means that has led to police pushing the line back, trying to disperse the crowd. And so what we've seen here is at least 1 arrest. We've seen the dispersal of tear gas also in this crowd to try to push the crowd back. At this point right now, the crowd has sort of dispersed. They're trying to look for another way in back to where those white nationalists are, and it's led to a number of conflicts between counter-protesters and police.
Now, of course, that's NBC, and they've got to castigate people as much as possible and mischaracterize who they are. It wasn't white nationalists, but that's beside the point. At the end of the day, this is actually how the event should have worked out in Charlottesville, where you keep the 2 groups separated, and then you see who actually gets arrested and where the violence happens. Where was the violence happening? Where was the violence happening in Seattle? Well, it was Antifa attacking police for not allowing them to attack the people that they hate. That's where the violence happened. The people that were there doing their thing were not violent. You got to see where this whole thing comes from. So in that case, I would have to say that the police and the government did their job. And amazingly enough, I don't think anybody was killed. Nobody was ran over with a car. It's amazing. But when you pull the cops out and you decide not to defend a group because you don't like them, then guess what happens? All right. Well, I don't want to keep these things going super long, and I have been here of late, and there's really not much to say left with this situation. I'm very unhappy. I'm very unhappy with the way this is being talked about by a lot of different people. I haven't decided. I saw a big piece from Ben Shapiro. I'm thinking about doing a video about that. So be looking for that. I started cutting it up today, and I've got some things to say about his characterization of this. But the most important thing that you need to take away from this whole event is that the groups that everybody's talking about, the groups that were involved in this incident, are irrelevant. The death, the murder, I'm sorry, it's irrelevant. Doesn't matter. Because it can be predicted that these things will happen. It has been predicted that these things will happen. That's why we created a government city system in the first place, the civitas. That's why it was created. That's why in nomadic cultures, when people started banding together, they created a chief or a chieftain. Because people within the tribe would sometimes war with each other, and there had to be a way to mitigate those things for the betterment of all. You couldn't have all the warriors just stabbing each other and taking each other's wives. You couldn't do that. You couldn't live in the state of anarchy. You couldn't do it. So we created a government. The purpose being to protect individual from individual, enshrined in our Constitution. Our Constitution gives us the right to ask for authority through speech. The government doesn't want you to have that right anymore. So they decided to shirk their responsibility and allow individual to attack individual in hopes that in the future, they can take away your authority of speech. All right, that is it, my friends. Michael Newman wrapping things up. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please go to the website. It is michaelnewmanproductions.com. There you can get the links for the stories we talked about in today's show. You can, of course, contact me. Love to hear any of your comments. You can leave a comment on YouTube when I get this thing uploaded there as well. You can also send me an email. Just click the contact link and the email will come right to me. Facebook, YouTube, and, of course, my Twitter is Newmaniac1. Just look for me on Twitter, and I'll be right there for you. And if you would, please, please, please support the show. It's getting harder and harder to get this done. I'm having to spend more time doing other things to get to pay the bills. So that's why you've seen fewer and far between shows. But we're doing our best here at the Michael Newman program, and with your help, maybe we can keep it going. And you can help me out for as little as $1 a day. Have a great evening.
Wow, see ya.